Welcome to your Healing Place podcast with Linda and Mindy. It is our desire to address common concerns of how abortion and faith intersect in order to validate the emotional pain and grief that abortion can bring and give hope that recovery is possible. But I'd like for us in this segment to talk about just the stigmas that we have with abortion. I mean, what in the heck is a stigma? Really? I mean, how do we define that? I don't even know. I've never really thought about that. I'm going to actually look it up just to see what it says in my dictionary app. And it says a mark of disgrace or infamy. I can't say that very well. A stain or reproach as on one's reputation. In medical, it means a mental or physical mark that is characteristic of a defect or disease. It's interesting. It's got several meanings. And in fact, in this very secular dictionary app, it says the word stigmata means marks resembling the wounds of the crucified body of Christ, said to be supernaturally impressed on the bodies of certain persons. Never heard of that.
Okay. Strange. No,
but
that's different.
I kind of go with the first, a mark of disgrace or infamy, a stain or reproach as on one's reputation. And when I think of that particular definition, honestly, at least from my experience, my story, that stigma was something I placed on myself. I don't know that anybody else placed that on me. I think I felt like my reputation was a reproach, a stain, my life, my heart, because nobody else told me that. In fact, nobody's talking about it. I mean, true, we have one side, and I don't want to be inherently political on this. I really want this to be a point of healing for our listeners. But
okay,
one side says it's no big deal. It's not a life. It's like having a tooth pulled. Just you can go, you can forget about it and go on. And then the majority of us after our abortion go, that's not true. I can't move forward. I'm stuck. Why am I stuck? Or as you and I both know, after being on a helpline for abortion recovery, many of them come saying, well, I know I made the right choice, but I don't understand why I feel this way. Because in their head, logically, they made a good choice. And so I don't know that they're bearing a personal stigma, but they're bearing the marks of grief for sure, right? But then there's the other side, which I think we can confidently say without being disrespectful, is the church. It's murder. The pro-life side, it's murder. It is. But nobody's saying that it's a mark on your reputation. Really, those are comments about the baby. It's no big deal. It's like pulling a tooth. You can move on, right? The other side, it's murder. That's about a baby. They're not very few in the pro-life arena. Maybe the ultra, I can't think of the right word to call them. Call us murderers, like directly. Yeah, maybe. I'm thinking of a more stronger word and I can't think of it right now, but they call us murderers. But for the most part, we're not hearing that. I wasn't anyway, back in our day. I mean, were you hearing people say people who had abortions were murderers, largely?
I have, but not largely. Yeah. Remember, I was going to speak at a United Methodist Church one time up here in Spring Hill, and I was down in the pew, and some women were talking behind me, and one of them basically said that. She said, I just can't understand why anybody would have abortion. They're just murderers. And that was right before I got up and told my story.
Nice.
I tried to make eye contact with her and smile at her.
That's kill him with kindness, kind of a thing. Well, I've heard people say very well-meaning, not meaning to be cruel to anybody, say half of that statement, not necessarily to me, but I've heard them say it in my presence. I can't understand why anyone would have an abortion.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
remember that was actually, and the first time I actually heard that like strongly in my presence, I was training at the pregnancy center to be a worker. And I hadn't shared with anybody yet in that class that I had an abortion. We went through
Mm-hmm.
8 weeks of training together. And it was on the very last night, or right at the very end, when we all had to share our stories, that I shared. And everybody
Oh.
sat there with their mouths gaping open. And that wasn't my intent. But my intent was I needed to know how much I was healed, because I knew I had been triggered by that word abortion previous. And so I wanted to allow myself to respond without anyone knowing, so I could
And what a
understand.
gift to them, because now they can put a face on it and they can understand why the women
Mm-hmm.
are struggling.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Definitely. But I remember my friend who we were just getting to know each other through that training, and now she's a really good friend. And she came up to me just devastated. I'm so sorry I
Mm.
said that. I said, don't be. I said, it's
Oh,
okay.
she
I
was the
said,
one that said it.
uh-huh. And I said, it's okay. You don't, it's okay. Honestly, as soon as she said it, I had to ask myself the question. I don't understand either how I had an abortion.
It's true.
I really don't. I look
Mm-hmm.
back and I'm like, how could I do that? I mean,
Mm-hmm.
there's a
Mm-hmm.
whole bunch of reasons why we did that. So stigma is huge. And probably stigma, if we look at that definition really closely again, is really fear of being condemned, right? Fear of somebody else shaming us, and yet we also shame ourselves. Some of us know what we did. I know women, and I'm sure you've heard women talk on the line that say, I was always pro-life or always pro-choice, but I never thought I would be. It was never for me.
Wouldn't happen to me.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I had one woman come through, very sweet.
Or the ones that say I was always pro-life until I got
Yeah.
into the situation. Had a
Yes,
lot of those
yes.
too.
And
Mm-hmm.
one of those ladies came through. If you remember, if you could jog your memory, I don't want to say her name or anything, but she came through a group and just could not get over that fact. That was just a
That she'd
really
done that.
hard, that was a stain on her, because she was so ardently pro-life. She almost disdained women who had abortions in her heart. And
Mm.
she didn't understand that until
Mm-hmm.
she had an abortion. And now she's trying to reconcile all that. And that's just a hard place to be. That is a hard place to be.
Mm-hmm.
I felt for her.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So tell me, like, Linda, because I know I've heard your story and
I
we've
think of,
talked, but I'm curious about
okay.
stigma from your point of view and how that played out in your life.
Hmm.
Did you call it something like
Um,
that?
what would I have called it? I mean, going back to the scarlet letter, having the big A on your forehead,
Yeah.
you feel like everybody can see that
Yeah.
that you have that in your background.
Mm-hmm.
And it is something that we wear around,
Yeah.
whether they really know it or not. We think they do.
Yeah.
Um, for me, God started my healing so early because it was so traumatic. And I started telling my story within 5 years. I was a pregnancy center director and already telling my story.
Oh.
So for me, it was out there already, you know. Um, and we wouldn't want to go into this on the on the podcast, but um, I think there was a time where it became my identity to a lot of people. They saw me as the woman that had an abortion.
Wow.
So it became not that I was ashamed of it and God was using it, so I was sharing it. Um, but it became, I don't know if that's stigma though.
Do you have any kind of recollection of when you first started hearing that word used? I feel like that the word stigma with
Stigma?
abortion has been around for a long time, but I don't know. I could be wrong
I
about
don't think
that.
I've ever really thought about it before.
Okay.
Mm-mm.
Because I always share, because I had 3 abortions. And so I always share with people that um, especially with women that I'm ministering to in our groups, I always share, there's a stigma with abortion for sure, but there's a stigma when you have multiple abortions, additional. And it's just this,
Or
I
a late
never,
term abortion.
yeah, oh yeah, definitely. And I don't know that I even really knew until I just looked up the definition of what stigma really meant. But now that I keep kind of glancing back over at this definition, a stain or reproach as on one's reputation. So it could be on anything else, your character, it could be on your, you know, on yourself. Um, but I agree. I totally
That's what
agree.
are people gonna see me differently? If they find out, are they gonna see me
Yeah.
differently?
Yeah,
Hmm.
definitely. But I will agree, sharing your story, while the scariest thing for the majority of us, the idea of sharing this with anybody just strikes fear to the very core and heart of our being.
Yeah.
That is where, I mean, healing comes in Christ, in Jesus, period. But it is amazing that the more you share it, the more light is shed on it, because it's no longer hidden inside you as
Mhm.
this deep dark secret, and you're just kind of, it's out
Yeah.
there, and now there's no more power against you because you're already admitting to
Right,
something you've
because
done.
people already know. When you've given your testimony and it's out there, people all know. So it's not like they can come back, you know, hit
Yeah,
you over the head with it. It's
yeah.
already out there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so we'll have to talk about more into that, about sharing our stories and what that can look like, and how to start that process, because you don't just, well, maybe for some they just go out and they start sharing. I know there's women that come through our group say, yeah, I've already been sharing my story a little bit, but there's still a lot of stuff going on inside of them that they don't understand, and they need healing and they need help with. So
Mm.
yeah, we'll have to come back and talk about that um, another time. But I think for today, I think for this segment, we're going to be finished talking about stigma. Thank you for listening. This podcast was inspired by the many conversations had through the years with women struggling from the emotional pain associated with abortion. Thank you for allowing us into your healing journey. Subscribe on major platforms where podcasts can be heard. Learn more about virtual abortion recovery healing at www.anevenplace.com. The link is in the show notes.